Welcome to today's video. Today we're going to be learning how to make a no-sew bow. So we're going to use a little bit of hot glue and some fabric. I'm going to make a big poofy bow just for the sake of it being easier to see. But you can make them any size you want. I don't have exact measurements. You can play around with it. I used to love making bows. I used to sew them. I used to glue them. I tried making different shapes, like more rounder and more pointy, and it's really fun to do that. It's a fun little, day craft. So the most important thing to note during this entire process is to make sure that you are constantly tucking in rough edges. It doesn't matter how much you tuck them in. You can tuck them in a 1/4 inch, a 1/2 inch. You could tuck them in like halfway across the entire width or length of the fabric. So I'm going to start by tucking in my 2 ends. And something to keep in mind with hot glue is that the more solid your glue is, the more stiff the outcome is going to be. So you can do dots occasionally and it'll be much more flexible. For these strips right here, I'm doing a more solid line. That way the bow will stick straight up. It'll be more solid, more poofy, sticking straight up and down. And then I'm gluing in the longer edges. No, I'm gluing in the corners first, sorry. You don't need to glue these in if you don't want to. I just find it to be a little bit neater if you glue in the corners. It also makes it more bulky though, so keep that in mind. So just out of curiosity, just a fun little question. How many of you prefer bows and how many of you prefer ties? I am a big fan of both, but I own more ties than I do bows. I used to wear ties all the time. I love them so much. But bows are really cool too. They're very, fluffy. Now I'm gluing along the longer side. This is going to be going across your bow horizontally. So if you want it to stick out more firmly and not like flop forward, you can do a more solid line. If you'd like it to, be a little bit floppy, go ahead and do some dots. This is the part where I mentioned you can fold in, just a little bit, or you can fold in halfway. It just depends on the width of the bow that you want and how full of fabric you want it to be. I chose to do a lot of fabric so that it would be a more stiff bow because I plan on making this a bow tie for my bulldog. I have a bulldog and a pit bull, and they both absolutely love dressing up. They love the attention. It is hilarious. And so I love making bows and scarves and stuff for them. And then we're gonna fold them kind of towards the center. You can separate the 2 edges a little bit if you want, but it is going to go under a little center wrap, so make sure they're close enough for that to cover. Also, I recommend just doing a few dots of glue here because we're going to be scrunching this part up and you want it to cooperate, otherwise it will be frustrating. Figure out how thick you want your center bit to be and then cut the fabric a little bit more than that, keeping in mind how your fabric is reacting to you folding it as you glue it. That way you give yourself enough space so it's not, sloppy and lumpy and, too thin. A fancy little trick I learned, which isn't actually working with this particular fabric, but creasing the fabric a little bit. If you don't have an iron, you can crease it with your thumbs and it should in theory stay folded. Here I'm doing not dots because I didn't want like giant circles to be apparent in the fabric, but I did a very thin row of glue. That way it was still very flexible because this is going to be wrapping around our bow. Now we are going to figure out how we want to scrunch our bows. You can scrunch it as many or as little times as you want. I recommend doing the center and the 2 sides facing down with 2 little hills facing up towards you, and then face your work down on the wrap. And just to help keep the shape a little bit, I'm doing a couple little dots of glue. That way it's not fighting me while I'm wrapping the ribbon around it. Again, it is a good habit to just glue in the ends as well. It is just nice to work with some neat, material. To help us get some leverage on wrapping this around, we're gonna go ahead and glue it into one of the edges. I chose the bottom edge of my bow. And then we're gonna wrap our bow around, find out how much space we need, how, loose or how tight we want the bow to be. Cut off any excess, leaving a little bit of space to tuck it in. And then leaving a gap in the center so you can insert a clip or an elastic band to wear around your neck, or in my case, my dog's neck. Glue together the two ends of the ribbon. If you're permanently attaching this to something, go ahead and glue that on before you finish closing this ribbon part. Or if you want to be able to switch it out with something, you can just leave it as is and then just clip in a clip or, loop through an elastic. I hope you enjoyed this craft. I hope you're having a wonderful day, and happy crafting!